Welcome to Beginning Ham Radio, sponsored by the Portland Amateur Radio Club. And this week we're going to be talking about Maidenhead grids and contesting. So I'm going to switch. So I'm going to be borrowing Delvin Bunton's presentation on Gridsquares because he actually did a really good job of putting a presentation together. So I thought, why copy it when I can just borrow his. So if we take a look at what Maidenhead Gridsquares are, they are a map coordinate system where the Earth is divided into 324 fields or squares identified by 2 letters. So, and he's in Vancouver, Washington. And so Vancouver and Portland both lie in what is known as Charlie November. So each field is 20 degrees in longitude and 10 degrees in latitude. And the first letter represents longitude and the second letter then represents latitude. And so you can actually see here on the map, it starts at A. This whole column is A, right at kind of the tip of the Aleutian Islands right there. B, C, D, and it keeps going all the way across RS, to R. And then the second letter is going to be longitude. And so you're going to start with A down here at the South Pole, going all the way up to R for the North Pole. And so each of these fields, you can see that the one here up in Canada is DO. That particular square is divided or subdivided into 100 squares. And you can see these subdivisions here. So if this represented the DO or the CN, which is where Portland and Vancouver, Washington are located, then they're broken up again into another 100 squares. So, and this is what the continental US grid square of 488 grid squares looks like if we were to overlay the Maidenhead grid square system on top of the United States. This system was kind of the version 2.0 of an earlier system that was somewhat similar that just covered the European countries. And so back in, I think about 1954, they decided to expand the system to cover the entire world. And that's what the Maidenhead grid square system is. So one of the uses for Maidenhead grid squares is for giving your location or approximate location very quickly in contests, for example, like voice or CW or even digital. And so an example of one of these contests is the Fred Fish Memorial Award. And this is a contest that happens every year. And you get a Fred Fish Award by contacting all 488 continental United States grids on 6 meters. And so Fred Fish, he actually accomplished the feat in 2008. And then this award contest was created after he passed or was a silent key. And so in March of 2017, and it may be more now, I haven't checked, but only 7 people so far have completed the challenge. And you can see here, this is a March 17th, most needed grid squares. And so if you can see that the darker green represents grid squares that aren't rare. There's a lot of people that live there and it's fairly easy to actually get a contact in these grid squares. But as you go into the orange, the yellow, and especially the red grid squares, you can see that there's a Delta Mike 02 down here that's very rare. And most likely it's because most of it consists of water or a place that's pretty inaccessible. So along the Oregon, Washington, and part of California coast on the left-hand side, you can see that there are quite a few that are in the top 10 to 25 grid squares most needed. Portland here, you can see, is Charlie November 85. And that's a pretty big grid square, covers Pacific City all the way out, way past Gresham. And here's some ham populations in the nearby squares. So CN85, do we have that on here? We don't. But you can see that there are some grid squares where there are no hams that are located, and it's just because it's a rural area with probably not a lot of people. I'm going to actually come back to that slide. So here is an example of a rare grid square, and it's actually, you can see Astoria is here, Westport, Washington is here, and the grid square lies almost exclusively in the ocean with just a little bit of land in Washington that is part of that grid square. So you can see why that with only 173 hams living in this grid square, it's rare in comparison to, for example, like CN85, which covers the downtown Portland area, which has over 5,000 hams. And here's one that's really rare, and I believe this is CM79, which is down in California. And it's just this little tiny patch of land, probably national forest, that is inside that grid square. Another contest, every year there are 2 VHF, UHF contests that is sponsored by the ARRL. They are in January and June, and I think actually there's a third one in August. They typically use single sideband, CW, digital, and sometimes Morse code. In fact, there's more, FM or frequency modulation. And that's basically using your handheld or your mobile radio in your car. And you can actually just go out for the weekend and make contacts. And one of the, there's 2 kind of stations. One is a mobile station or a rover station where you drive to a certain location and then you would set up your operating station there. You'd make a lot of contacts, and then you would kind of pack everything up and drive to another location, and you'd make more contacts in another square. And so you can participate using just your handheld or your mobile radio on FM, but you would need to do it simplex. Repeater contacts don't count. And you can use that, you can do that FM with 6 meters, 2 meters, 440. And the most common is going to be 2 meters and 440. And a lot of times people will say, hey, if you contact them on 2 meters, they'll ask you, hey, are there any other bands? Because then you get more contacts if you contact the same person on another band like 440. And I think that was all I was going to talk about in this one. If you go to Wikipedia, you'll find that there's the same picture that's on Wikipedia in case you want to get like a high level reference. And if you wanted to take a look at what your grid square is, if you just, I never really kind of remember the address because it's a very long URL. But if you just go to Google and you just Google Maidenhead grid square, then one of the first results that come up is going to be, let's see, there we go. It's Levine Central. And this is where you can either enter your address or just a zip code or your call sign. And the call sign is the data or the address is provided by QRZ, and they get their information from either the FCC or from people that go to QRZ and put their address in there. Or you can put in any 4 or 6 character grid square. So I put in my zip code 97045 and click submit. And then this is what I got back. So it's a square here that will show you exactly where the center of that zip code is, and then where, how far that covers. And you can zoom in and out, and you can pan. Don't think you can necessarily change grid squares unless you actually type in the next grid square. So if you wanted to see what CN85 covers, which is most of what the Portland area covers, So that's going to be a much bigger grid square. And it covers a lot of the northern Oregon coast, downtown Portland, all the way over to Gresham and a little bit farther east, down to almost Salem, and then up to almost Longview. The two character, then 2-digit, and then there's also a smaller grid square by dividing this into 100 more grid squares. So if I were to type in CN85RI, and that's actually how it's formatted. So capital C, capital N, then 85, and then lowercase RI. And if I were to look this one up, then this will give me where I'm located, my house is located, which is in a smaller grid square. So it's 100th the time of the size of CN85. So you can find yours out just by going to this address, to this website rather, and entering your grid, your address in here or your zip code. And if you just enter your zip code, you may need to zoom in to make sure that your street or your cross streets are listed on there. So let's see. Here's another picture of the Fred Fish Memorial Award Most Wanted grids. And you can see that the West Coast and Mountain Time are really the areas where there are a lot of most wanted. And again, just because it's less people and more space. That's more about the Fred Fish Award. The other, so talking about grid squares, I want to just bring up two more mapping systems that aren't necessarily ham radio related, but it is interesting just to find out that there are grid squares really are used just for ham radio. But there's a lot of other mapping and coordinate systems that have been designed by different people or different companies for different purposes. And I thought this was fairly interesting. Anybody know what a Google Plus code is? So if I enter an address, for example, my house, and unfortunately you can't, let's see, I'll just enter Oregon City. Let me reload it. Maybe it didn't. There we go. Okay, so here's my house. And that's my garage right there. And so the plus codes are, they're 4 digits, 4 characters, a plus, and then 2 characters. And this is actually, can be used anywhere in the world because, again, Google, the maker of plus codes, they blanketed the earth in these little tiny squares. And you can see that they're very tiny. So in fact, if I can just place a square on here. So the left side of my garage is 8 Charlie Victor Victor plus 835. So it's a very small area. I don't know exactly how big it is. It's probably 10 feet by 10 feet is what it looks like to me. And that's a way that you can encode, transmit, and then decode a pretty small point anywhere in the world. Then the other one that is fairly interesting is called What 3 Words. And you can see on the top left, it's what, the number 3, and then words. And let's see if I can type in an address or find a map here. There we go. So if I were to search again for my address, it's doing all these intro things for me, but you can see that here's my house and here's my garage. So if you really wanted to get to like my front door, I'm estimating it's going to be right about here. So that tiny square there, again, it looks like it's about 10 foot by 10 foot or less. Oh, something happened to my video. There we go. That one, the address is breached.principal.listen. And so again, it's 3 words that are these make up these tiny letters, and these grids will they blanket the entire Earth. And one of the reasons that this particular company came up with the 3 words, or what 3 words address, is because a lot of countries outside of the US don't have good addressing systems. I remember when I went down to Costa Rica in 2007, I brought my GPS along. Unfortunately, the map that I loaded into it, even it was one that I had purchased for a Garmin GPS device. It was not very good at all at trying to locate anything, because there weren't a lot of addresses in Costa Rica. A lot of addresses, especially outside in the country, were things like 200 feet beyond the old oak tree, and the old oak tree isn't there anymore because it fell down 20 years ago. So that's just a local way of people knowing how to get to places, but not necessarily visitor friendly. So this is just an interesting mapping location or system that I found interesting. So I'm going to stop here. Does anybody have any questions about Gridsquares, or do you guys know what your grid square is?
I know that I was the CN85, but I don't know anything more detailed than that.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting if you just go Google Maidenhead Grid Square and come to the website that will this one that will tell you your grid square based on your address. You can find out what the next 2 digits are. So for me, it's RI, but for you, it might be something else. And I'm just for fun, I will actually put this in the chat box in case anybody wants to save that or look it up later. A lot of people will put their grid square on their QSL card because if you are doing contesting like the Fred Fish Award or you're doing VHF, UHF contesting, then rather than printing or writing down your grid square as a confirmation on your QSL card, you might just print it on there automatically.
That's brings up a question I would like is, I want to make a QSL card, but I don't know all the information that should go on it. So that would be something I'd be interested in talking about at a future time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of information that you can put on it, but there are some kind of like standards, and we can bring that up in a little bit. And I'll pull up my QSL card.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have questions about grid squares or grid square contesting?
I'd like to know if I'm sure that you'll email that information out, but local contest, there was like the POTA contest this last weekend, and like 2 weeks ago, there was specifically the UHF VHF contest. So I just, I vote for yes, that we as a group, when the COVID is over, that we reinstate going and playing radio. I'm totally in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So that's a great question. And what I am going to do, I'll share my web browser again. So what I did was I just Googled contest calendar, but the first result here is just contestcalendar.com. And so this is by WA7BNM. And this is probably one of the more definitive and easiest to use contest calendars there is. So it defaults to 8-day. And so you can see for July 14th through the 21st, which is, I actually have this one selected, but if you want to, you can see the next 3 weeks here. So we're looking at the 22nd, which is today, through the 29th. Realize this is UTC. So you will have to subtract either 7 or 8 hours, depending on which time zone you're in. And it will list the contests here. And it has a nice graph showing you like how long they are. So the longest contest is this one right here, the K1S, no, I'm sorry, the RSGB IOTA contest. Here's a Flight of the Bumblebees, which is coming up this weekend. It's not very long. That is a CW contest. You can do it from home, or you can do it from a field somewhere. And if you want more information on them, just click on them, and then it will bring you down to all the information is below. And usually there's either 1 or 2 links or URLs. So one of them is going to be the where you post your logs, and the other one will be where you find more rules. And so for this one, I'm just going to click on this, and it's done by the Adventure Radio Society. And then below here, it'll tell you what the rules are. And the rules usually are like, what is the exchange? So it tells you like you have to do a /BB, which I Flight of the Bumblebees, or, you know, if you were a bumblebee. And then if you're a home station, then you just exchange your RST, or your signal strength. So let me go back to the calendar here. The other way to look at this calendar, which is actually really useful, there's a 12-month calendar, which will then list from the most recent month, which is, I guess, June now. But as you scroll down, then you can see here's all the contests in July. And if you want more information on any of these, you would just click on the plus sign, and then it'll take you to that specific page for that contest. And here's a really cool thing. So it tells you what the future dates are. So if you're planning on doing it in this one, oh yeah, here we go, 2021, 22, 23, 24. So if you're going on vacation, you know, 2 years in advance, you can actually find out when that contest is going to be 2 or 3 years in advance. The other really cool thing, I think, is you can, and I'm trying to remember, up here, it will give you 2 options to export either export or link the calendar. And so, and I forget which one's which, but one of these is for the Google Calendar, and the other one I think is for iCalendar. And so when you do that, give me just a second, I'm going to pull up my calendar. Yep, there we go. I gotta switch tabs. So here's my Google Calendar. And by clicking on that and linking it to my Google Calendar, you can see that I have an other calendar down here, the WA7 BNM. And so here are all of the contests in local time. So if I, actually that's in the past, let's do one that's actually in the future. So this the CW mini, they have a short, I think it's 30-minute contest that's done with Morse code, but every Wednesday they have 3 time slots. So they have a 6 a.m., a 12 p.m., and an 8 p.m. So if I click on the 8 p.m. one, then it will tell me what time it is. It's between 8 and 9 p.m. my time, which is great because then I don't have to calculate UTC. And then if I click on the info here, it takes me to the info tab of the contest calendar. And then from here, I can get the rules, and I can also, I know where to submit my logbook for the score.
Hey, Max, if you're not sharing that screen
Yeah,
with
I
us.
just saw that. So let me, sorry, let me do that again. Thanks for letting me know. So here's my calendar. So here's all of the CW Ops mini tests, 6 a.m., 12 p.m., and 8 p.m. So if I click on the 8 p.m. one, it'll tell me it's between 8 and 9 p.m. my time on Wednesday, July 28th. And then if I click on the info, then it'll take me to the info page. And you get to this, or you link your calendar just by, you can go to the 8-day and then clicking on whichever one of these. I think the first one here is Google Calendar, and the second one I think is iCalendar. And you can then link your Google Calendar, your iCalendar to the contest calendar. And the great thing is that if you, this is a lot of contests. So you can always, on the left-hand side, at least in Google, you can uncheck the contest calendar. And that way you only check it when you actually want to check for what contests are coming up.
Can I ask a really newbie question?
Yeah.
So I've noticed there's like a certain way that people throw out their signs and do the calling CQ for different kinds of contests. Are they all pretty much the same? It's like CQ Parks on the Air or CQ Soda or like CQ Mini CW, or I mean, is there like, because that's where I feel like hesitant, like if I go out 1 or 2 times with somebody that knows what they're doing, I can kind of get the feel of the timing and the cadence. Do you know what I mean? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, because for example, let me go back to the 8-day calendar. Let's go to the Flight of the Bumblebees. It will tell you what your exchange is right here. So the exchange is your name plus the state, province, or country that you're in. So state if you're in the US, province if you're in Canada, country if you're in neither of those countries. However, you'll see that, let's take a look and see. Actually, I'm sorry, this is the Flight of the Bumblebee here. So here's your exchange. So if you're a Bumblebee, which means you're out in the field, then it's your RST, your signal report, plus the state, province, or country, plus your Bumblebee number. And it doesn't say here like what specifically you're talking about, Stevie, but if I go to the rules here, I wanted to see who or what it says.
But it'll say like if people want your grid square, if they want your Bumblebee number, or they want your park number, or which summit you're on, it's like they each have their own kind of unique identifier, but it's generally a similar cadence.
So it's
like generally how to practice without actually practicing is kind of the question I'm asking.
Yeah, exactly. So and it's a good idea to look at the contest calendar to find out, like, for example, especially if you're operating on the weekends, find out what contests there are going on right now. Because a lot of times there will be a big contest going on and somebody will say, oh, I need your grid square, or oh, I need your contest number or a serial number. And that's called the exchange. And so you can see that when you make a contact with somebody, depending on this particular contest, depending on whether you're a Bumblebee, which means that you've pre-registered and you're out in the field, or if you're a home station, which is basically anybody else. So if you hear somebody calling CQ BB, which is for Bumblebee, and this would be on Morse code only because it's a Morse code only contest, but the same applies for voice, then what they're looking for is they're looking for your RST, which is your readability, your signal, and your tone on CW, and your state, province, or country. So that would be all that you would need to give them, besides, of course, your call sign. So, for example, here's a sample exchange. So here's a Bumblebee NE6SW/BB, and he's going to send the signal report for you, which is 579. He is in, there's 579. He is in California, CA, and then he will say BB73 or NR73. And so really, that's the only thing that you need besides, of course, the call sign. Does that make sense, Stevie?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Because that kind of puts in perspective all of the contests for me, the way that you went through the exchange example that was outside of a contest that I was familiar with. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and so if we were just to like, for example, if we were to this weekend, which is going to be like the 23rd, 24th, 25th, and we see that there, and we were operating right during this time. There's not a lot of big contests going on that span multiple hours, but let's say that we're operating at this time. So this K1 USN slow speed contest, then you can take a look here at the exchange. And so all they need is your name and your state if you live in the US. And here's one, this must be a Russian contest. So you probably wouldn't have anybody contact you, but their exchange is RS, which is for voice, your readability and your signal strength. If you're working Morse code, then you would also need to include the tone, so an RST, plus your serial number, plus your IOTA number. And the IOTA number is going to be, it's a very large region. And I always forget which IOTA number that we are in here. I think it's 3. And your serial number, for people who are in the contest, what this is indicating is that as they make contacts, they'll start out with serial number 1 and then go to serial number 2 and 3 and so on. So if you were only to contact one person or 2 people that were in this contact, then, and they ask you for a serial number, then if you haven't ever been asked before for this particular contest, just give them number 1. If you have, then you would do number 2 and number 3 and so on. That helps them because a lot of people who are, especially on the weekends, working contests, and you may just be like casually making contacts, it's always helpful if they can get the exchange from you, especially if it's a popular contest. Any other questions? Accidentally put it full screen. One of the things I was going to look up is the IOTA map. There we go. Oh, so this is Islands on the Air. I didn't know that they had a map. Anyway, you can see that we're up here in North America, and this is not a very good picture of that. Let's see if I can find another one. So there, one other is the ITU zone, and this is probably one that you would want to put on your QSL card. It's actually really easy to put on your QSL card. And of course, I'm looking for. This is looks like what I'm downloading is a very detailed map that you could actually print out. Okay. So yeah, so we are in ITU zone 3, and that covers all of like Washington, Oregon, California, and it extends quite a distance. And this map is kind of hard to see, but you can see that we're ITU zone 3. And if you give me just a second, I'm going to pull up my QSL card that you can then see what information that I put on. There we go. So I'll do a new share. So this is the back of my QSL card. And you can see that I put Gridsquare CN85RI. I've also put just a blank here in case I'm somewhere else. And so I could like cross this one out if I was visiting another location and put in the Gridsquare that I was in here. My ITU zone is 6 and my CQ zone is 3. Here's a couple other indicators, and this is really not necessarily completely standard, but there's a organization called FISTS, and that's dedicated to promoting Morse code. And so all you have to do is sign up for a number, and there's my number there. And the Straight Key Century Club is another Morse code club that promotes the use of straight keys. And so there's my number there, 15800. So another very common thing to put on a card is PSE QSL and TNX QSL. So if I made a contact with somebody and they sent me a QSL card, then they would check PSE QSL, which means that they sent one, please send one back if they wanted one. But if I already sent them one, then they would check TNX QSL. And on my return, if they sent me one and I wanted to send them one, then I would check TNX QSL, meaning that I already received theirs. So here is, the top here is pretty standard. So it's a blank space for your confirming QSO with, and this is where you would put the other person's call sign, the date, and the most common formatting for date is day, month, year. It's the kind of the European and the rest of the world formatting. And then time, UTC, which is the Universal Coordinated Time, or the Zulu time. The megahertz, and that you could just put a 20-meter band there, or you could actually write out, 14.065 megahertz. The RST, which is the signal report, and then what mode is it? Was I using CW? Was I using single sideband? The one I didn't put on here because I don't use it very much is digital mode. But those are the three major modes that that you would use. So that's kind of the standard QSL card. And just so you know, there are really two ways to design a QSL card. You can do one that has all of this information on the front and none of it on the back. The back would really just be used for a message and their address. The other way is that you would put some kind of picture on the front and maybe some of the information like your call sign and your address, but the rest of the information that you write down about the other station would be on the back. So if I open the front, you can see on the front, I have a picture and my call sign, and then just my name and address and my email address. And then on the back, then I would have all the other information. And a really good way just to kind of figure out like how you want to design a QSL card would just simply be go Google QSL card, and you'll see a lot of QSL cards that other people have already put together. And then you can kind of decide what you like, what you don't like, and make one that you like yourself. So let's do that. If we just go to QSL cards and images, there are going to be a lot of these QSL cards that come up that are very old, 1920s, 1930s. They're very simple QSL cards that people sort of just make themselves and print out on a printer. And then there are some that are just really kind of fancy QSL cards like this one here. That's a picture with some pretty cool text, and it almost looks like a postcard that you would buy somewhere. Here's another one. Looks like a picture of the Dallas landscape. And of course, you can have QSL cards made and there are still a few companies that make QSL cards, and you would just kind of send them the information, and then you order anywhere from 100 to 10,000 of them. And they have different designs that all sorts of like here's a QRP themed or old time. Some of them come in like full 4-color. Some of them are just black and white. So this is kind of like the old way of doing QSL cards, because they can get kind of expensive. You can see that they have $10 per 100, but I'm sure that that's not for the full 4-color QSL cards. So it looks like 100 cards are going to be $24.95. 250 is almost $50. So it really kind of just depends on how many you think you will go through and then how often you move, because you'll notice that most people will put their address on the front of the QSL card. Any questions about this?
No, thanks. That's really helpful.
Yeah. The so what I ended up doing is just designing my own QSL card, because I'm pretty good at using Photoshop and other programs like that. And then I went to, I think it's Got Print. Let me just check for sure. And essentially, yeah, let me share my screen again. So this company, they will print all sorts of things. They'll print stickers and calendars and business cards and things like that. But one of the things that they do is they'll print postcards. And most of the time it's for, for people or businesses that are sending out, sort of like marketing material, but they certainly will print QSL cards for you if you like. And it's just the standard 3x5 card. And if you want, they'll send you a sample of all of their printing, the paper that they use and the different thicknesses. So they have some pretty thick cards. They even have some duplex and triplex paper, which is like, it'll be one color on one side, for example, like a white gloss on one side, and on the other side that's kind of sandwiched to the back of it, it's like a dark blue matte color or something like that.
Thank
so
you so much for this.
Yeah,
what I wanted.
yeah, you can make some pretty cool cards. I think I spent like $50-$60 for 250 cards. So they're about the same price as that you would get with a custom card manufacturer, but I actually created the design myself from scratch. So some people don't go to all that trouble. Some people just print something off very simple using their printer and some cardstock, and there's nothing wrong with that. Cool. Any other questions about ham radio or Maidenhead Gridsquares? I will show you one kind of a cool site that is related to Gridsquares. So QRP Labs, they're most famous for their QCX transceivers. These are 5-watt transceivers. This is like the QCX Plus is like version 2 or version 3. And you can see that it's a very inexpensive radio. Most of it's built for you. And the nice thing about the QCX Plus is that you can buy a case for it. So it actually looks like a professional radio. I think a lot of it is, even though it's a kit, a lot of it's already kind of put together for you. And here's what the inside looks like. So a lot of it is through hole. I think that the surface mount they may already do for you, since most of us don't have the equipment or agility to do surface mount, and that's these tiny little things here. But the resistors and these capacitors, you would actually solder in yourself. So there's another view of it. And the nice thing about this advanced version is that it is, instead of having everything on one plane, so like the controls, the knobs would be all on the same plane, so you have to look over it. This new one is actually, you can actually set it on a tabletop and have the display facing the front so that you can see it. Anyways, the part that is interesting about this site is that they have a clock. I'm looking for the clock. There it is, the smallest one. So the clock is $19 or $20 basically, with a little bit for shipping. It's a pretty easy kit to put together, and you can actually use this 20 character by 2 line display Or some people have used a 20 character by 4 line display to just display more information. And so the concept of the clock is that you can have a message on the top, you can have the UTC time. A lot of people will also put the local time, but down here, if I can find it, now this RF64 VT, that's the grid square. And so if you were to pair your clock up with a GPS receiver, which is this QLG1, and so this additional board, it's a GPS receiver with the antenna built into it, is an additional $23. So for less than $50 plus shipping, then you would have a clock that as you move the clock around, for example, if you were to take it on vacation with you, it would automatically set the time to the local time because it knows where it is. And it would also adjust the grid square to whatever grid square you happen to be in. So if we go back here, at the bottom of the page, they have some examples of people that have put this together. So here's somebody that just took a plastic clear case, and the GPS unit is on the one on the top here, which is kind of a nice place to have it because here's the antenna for the GPS, and then the display is in the front. And so you can see that he customized it to actually say grid, and he's currently in grid FM 18GK. And he has his call sign here. And I think that is the altitude that he is currently located in. He has the date and then the time. And I don't know if that's a UTC or if that's a local time. But the cool thing is you can actually customize the display to display kind of whatever you want it to display. So here's somebody else that looks like they put it into just a piece of almost like a Tupperware or food container type thing. So yeah, here's somebody that they put the date, their call sign, the local time, the UTC time, and then the latitude, longitude. So it's kind of a nice shack clock for you. The great thing about using a GPS receiver is that you get very, very, very accurate time that really doesn't ever need to be set. So if anybody wants to take a look at that a little bit more, I'll put the link in the chat. And that's QRP Labs. They also have quite a few other kits that aren't very expensive if you're interested in putting something fairly easy together. It's a lot of these kits, they are just like a couple to a few hours to actually put together. Cool. Any other questions? Anybody planning on getting QSL cards made?
Yeah, that'll be my next priority.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, it's really kind of cool. Whenever you make a contact with somebody, you don't have to. There's nothing that says that you have to give them a QSL card. Of course, it's more and more expensive to do so, especially if you're making contacts, DX contacts or contacts overseas. However, in the US, I think postcard rates are, anybody know what postcard rates are? Are they 40 cents or 42 cents now? A lot of people will also just put them in small envelopes, not the number 10, but the smaller size. And they'll just put the current, is it 52 or 54 cent stamp on it. And it's kind of cool just to receive some of those in the mail. This past year, I made quite a few contacts, and just kind of out of the blue, people in the US would send me QSL cards. And it's always nice to have a few of my own, because if you receive one, it's kind of nice to send one back. It's very easy, even if you don't spend the hours and hours I did to design your own and get them printed, there are programs and even web-based generators that you can use just to create your own QSL card. If nothing else, just get a 3.5 by 5 card and put your, draw your call sign on it, and your address and the information, and you can send it that way. There's nothing wrong with doing something like that.
Do you usually, if you're going to send it out first, do you usually get the address from QRZ?
Yeah, QRZ is a great place to get the address from. Their address will actually oftentimes mirror what the FCC address is. That's a great question. Let me open up QRZ. So QRZ, somehow they turned on two-factor authentication for me. And so what I have to do, if you give me just a second, I have to go back and wait for a code to come in on text message. There we go.
One of the questions I have,
Yeah.
going back to contesting, when you look up the rules, is that where it will tell you how to submit your logs?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, let me go back there just in just a minute. There are two links. Almost always there's two links for contests at the contest calendar. And so if we take a look here, like this particular one, this contest, there's one for how to upload your logs or uploading logs at, and it'll give you a URL. And then the other one is for the rules. Sometimes there's only like, it says, find the rules here at this link. And then you could, and if it's a smaller one, for example, the Flight of the Bumblebees is not a very large one. So they're having you just email your electronic logs to an email address right there.
Is there a usual format that you use? Like when I know POTA, I'm using HAMRS and they already have it all done. And so it'll save it in the format I need, but do they tell you what format to use?
Yes, so most of them, let's actually see if this one says what format. Most of them use what's called Cabrillo format. And if we go take a look at how to submit the logs, there we go. So you can send your logs. This one doesn't say, but it's a Cabrillo format is what you want to submit most of them in, including all the ARRL ones. And if, let me see if I can pull up the field day or one of the other. Give me just a second. N3GFP is a very popular software. FJP, sorry. Let me take a look at images. I'm going to do the field day contest. So N3FJP, this is the software that it's very popular to use for field day contesting. And if you go up here after you're all done, if you go to File and then Export, and it'll give you a list of different export formats that you can do. And one of them is ADIF, which some people accept. The other one is Cabrillo. And these are text formatted, like DOS text formatted. And it will export the file. And then if you go into it, you can see how it formats. It's very easy to see how it lists all of your contacts. So sometimes there is a line that says soapbox, which is like a general notes, like, hey, I did this contest from this place, or whatever you want to put in there. The reason that they have you put them into standard formats is because a lot of the contest promoters or organizers will take all these logs and kind of put them together to do some behind the scenes checking. One of the things that they're looking for is people submitting logs who are just making it up. So if you submit a log with 1,000 contacts in it, and they find that if they compare your log to the 1,000 other logs that they received, then they can tell, you only had, 30% contacts that the other logs reflected. The other thing that they're looking for is what's called busted calls. So if you, for example, I did that with the name of this. So if you write down N3JFP and the real contact is N3FJP, then that would be considered a busted call. And then they would, so a lot of contests, they will actually dock you, for example, 2 points for that mistake. So you don't, it's kind of gives you an incentive for not making those kind of mistakes.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Were you going to go back to the thing we were talking about just before that, where you had to log in with your code?
Oh yeah, thank you. Yep. Let's see if I got logged in. I did. All right, here's QRZ. So if you already haven't, if you haven't been on QRZ, definitely go there. It is a really cool resource for news. So the front page is all about news. They also have online swap meet. So if you miss being able to go to swap meets, this is a great place to go. You can, here's a bencher iambic paddle that somebody is trying to sell. So it looks like they're charging 79 plus shipping. That's pretty close to what the price is new, but you know, I can't remember if they sell these anymore. But it's a very standard basic paddle. So it's a really neat website. To look up people's call signs, you would just use this upper left-hand side. So I'll just look up mine. I've not been very good at, so here's my detail. So the detail tab will give you all the information. For example, here's my grid square. It's slightly different than the CN85RI, and that's because I'm using an address that I think, let's check. Yeah, so I'm using a PO box address instead of my home address. And so it's just in a slightly different grid square. It does have like my email address. So if you made a contact with me and you wanted to just email me with questions, or you thought our conversation was cool, that's great. And then the biography page, which I unfortunately have not filled out yet, is would be here. And that would be a place where you can put pictures about what your shack or what your radios look like, or what your view out of your Hawaiian villa looks like, and then also just a lot of description of what kind of activity you're interested in. For example, DXing, or you're going after your DXCC award, things like that. So QRZ is also one of the places that has a logbook, and I haven't participated in the QRZ logbook, but if on my detail page, you can actually see, do I QSL by mail? I say yes. Do I QSL by eQSL, which is another platform that you can exchange QSL cards with. eQSL, the exchange of cards is it's kind of cool. You actually exchange what looks like a real QSL card with a picture of the mountains or whatever you want on it, and then uses Logbook of the World. And even though it's called Logbook of the World, it's not really a logbook. It's really a platform that will allow you to verify contacts with other people. The Logbook of the World is fairly popular. And it's not easy to sign up with. We might actually have an entire session, one of our monthly meetings, devoted to how to set up Logbook of the World. Once you have it set up, it's fairly easy. But it's really useful, especially if you are going after any of the ARRL awards or some of the other awards, because it keeps track of like your progress to that award. But again, QRZ is also another logbook platform that you can actually upload all of your contacts to, and it would tell you then who you made contact with and how close you are to certain awards. So yeah, QRZ is a very easy platform to look up people. I would say the other one, eham.net. least I thought so. They rearranged their website here, so sometimes I have trouble finding where to look people up. But somewhere in here, you can look people up. Eham.net has a great, they have a great classified section. So if you're looking to buy and sell used or new ham gear, the other thing that they do a really good job of is reviews. So if you're looking for a radio, for example, a HF transceiver, and I think it's transceivers HF, I'm looking for QRP because this is non-QRP. There we go, QRP radios. And I look at the Elecraft KX3. They actually may list that under non-QRP since it can actually go up to 15 watts. Let's see. Yep. So here is 156 reviews. Overall review is 4.7, which is pretty good. So if you're looking at particular radios, I would definitely go to eham.net and look up your specific radio that you're looking for, because some of these reviews go very in depth of like what they like, what they don't like, what their experience has been with the radio. And one of the easiest ways to find it is just type Google Eham and then space and then whatever radio it is that you're looking for. So for example, the FT891, which is one of Yaesu's more recent radios. And they'll actually tell you it's in production and here's the link to the brochure. And they have 115 reviews with an average rating of 4.2. And you can see that there's some people that really love it and there's some people that really hate it. So anyway, that's a good site to go take a look for what other people think. Cool, any other questions?
I'm sure I'll think of them as soon as we log off.
Absolutely. Well, that's why we have these every week. The one thing that we talked about this last meeting, the monthly park meeting, is that we are going to set up a in-person social meetup, probably once a month, probably 2 weeks after the regular meeting. And what this will give us a chance to do is kind of, because we're not able to return to in-person meetings for our presentations, it'll give us a chance to have people come to an informal meetup for socialization, and then we can talk about, what kind of things you've been up to amateur radio wise, if you have any questions, and then we'll try to get a kind of a topic. For example, I think our first topic is just going to be radio programming. And give me just a second. My camera seems to be messing up a little bit.
I'd be very interested in that. Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we'll probably just hold it in the better weather. We'll hold it at a either a brew pub. I'm sorry, the better weather will be in a park, someplace where there's benches or that we can still social distance. And I apologize about my video. I'm not sure what's going on there, but. And then in the cooler months or the super hot months, we may just go to a brew pub where minors are allowed, because we don't want to kind of exclude anybody that's not 21, or a restaurant that kind of has a larger space, and it'll be fairly informal, and we'll go on evenings where it's not crowded, so that we'll kind of be able to stake out a section of the restaurant or the brew pub by ourselves.
Yeah, that sounds great. I hope I'm in town when they're scheduled.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And the reason that we did that is we have had such a big turnout to the Zoom presentation meetings. I think for several reasons. Number one, it's just fairly easy to, I'll leave my video off if that's okay. It's fairly easy to, for people to join a presentation, and they don't have to drive there, especially during the winter months. You're actually driving there in the dark and coming home in the dark. And depending on where you live, that can be quite a trek. The other thing is that you can, just check in and listen to or watch the presentation from your own house. And you can do it while you're washing dishes or doing something else if you want. It's easy to record the presentation because it's all on Zoom. So we will record it and post it like we normally do. So if you aren't available at the time for the presentation, then you can always go back and watch it. And finally, we have a lot of people now that are outside of Portland. So about 66% of our membership now is inside of Portland that could probably somewhat easily drive to an in-person presentation meeting. But a lot of them are outside of Portland, a few hours to, even a few days. We have members now in California. So although they probably wouldn't be able to join the meetup, it's going to be a lot easier to include them for monthly presentations and meetings like this, the Beginning Ham Radio meeting.
Cool. One thing that I would be interested in, and I put a little note on the Facebook page, I think, but just looking for an Elmer, because a lot of times I can't make it to meetings where I can talk to people and stuff. So if I could find somebody in the club that would be interested in being an Elmer, that would be awesome.
Yeah, in fact, probably one of the best and easiest ways to get to know people, at least as far as like what they're experienced and what they're good at Elmering in, is if you go to the groups IO, the RagChew is very active. And so let me just pull up our website so I can show you guys that. So at the bottom of the website here is the Parks Group IO, and then this is the link. And if you just click on that, it will take you to Groups IO. And you all you need to do is join the group to be able to post. You don't even need to join the group in order to read the messages. You can actually read the messages. There's a lot of people that will either post questions on here or they will post answers of questions that people didn't ask. One of the recent ones that I really appreciated was, let me see if I can find. Oh wow, there were a lot of people that posted recently. Kathleen, I don't see it right now, but Kathleen posted a offer to send anybody that wanted it an Excel spreadsheet that people could enter their contacts into a spreadsheet and have it uploaded to QRZ and the SOTA databases. And it makes it very easy. So that's one way to kind of find people that are good at a particular topic. Another way is just going to be the social meetups that we have. So if you get a chance to attend those and you ask somebody, hey, I'm looking at starting in making contacts through satellites. There may be somebody that says, oh, John, he does that, or he's done that before. So I would look for that. And then I would just make sure you ask questions on the Beginning Ham Radio and like you have. So I really appreciate that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I didn't see that IO group, so I will do that. I know that I'm on a couple of the other IO groups.
Yeah, and you have a choice when you sign up whether you want to not receive any email at all or a daily digest of all the emails that have been passed back and forth, or if you just want every individual email or post that somebody posted. I do just the daily digest, and recently I've seen the daily digest won't be sent if there's no messages, but recently it seems like every day there's quite a few messages that are being posted. Cool, great question, Jesse. Cool, anybody else have any questions? If not, I'm gonna call this a wrap. I'm gonna have to try to figure out why my video is not behaving. It may just be that I need to restart my computer.
I learned so much at this meeting. Thank you so much for all this, man.
Oh, absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, that's why we have these. I think my last slide is just going to be what's coming up for next week. And
while you're doing that, I will say thank you for hosting the field day at your place. I met you briefly as you came out of your house and I was going back there, but it was great meeting some of the guys and watching the CW and asking some questions there, and they were more than happy to answer some of my questions. So that was great.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming out. And hopefully, I think next year will be a lot better field day because this, when you have Saturday and Sunday breaking records and as far as temperature, all-time records, it makes operating and having other people come out pretty challenging. So thanks for coming out.
Yeah, it was warm, but you guys did a good job of having the fans going in the garage and stuff. So that was
absolutely. Yeah, we tried everything that we could think of to, keep people cool. I'm glad some people brought frozen treats and things. So next week is going to be operating in other countries, followed by third-party traffic. And then if you're interested at all in 6 meters, and I haven't done a lot of 6 meter work, but 6 meters really, they call it the magic band for a reason. It's just a lot of fun. It's the band that's between HF and VHF, and it has its own propagation. So if you want to find out more about that, make sure you join us in 3 weeks. We'll talk about Skywarn and then Yagi antennas. There's more after that, but those are the next 5. Cool. Thanks for everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, keep them coming. And then just check your email for upcoming events and activities from the club.